The morning started like any other on Earth. Coffee brewing in kitchens from New York to New Tokyo. Children walking to school under bright skies. Ships launching from orbital stations, carrying supplies to the 12 human colonies scattered across nearby star systems. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Colonial Defense Force headquarters, watching the peaceful traffic above Earth. As Admiral of humanity's small military fleet, she knew these quiet moments were precious. Space was vast and humans had found friends among the stars. The gentle keepers shared their knowledge of stellar navigation. The crystal beings called singers traded their beautiful music for human art. Life was good for the 3 billion humans living across their corner of the galaxy. Everything changed at 1447, Universal Time. The first sign was the sensors going crazy, energy readings that made no sense, gravitational waves that shouldn't exist. Then space itself seemed to tear open above Earth's major cities. Massive ships emerged from the tiers, ships so large they cast shadows on the ground below. Sarah stared at the tactical display in disbelief. These weren't ships. They were floating cities made of black crystal and strange metals that seemed to bend light around them. The largest vessel hung over Geneva, easily 5 times bigger than humanity's largest space station. Its surface crawled with lights that pulsed in patterns that hurt to look at. The communications array exploded with activity. Every human settlement, from the mining colonies around Jupiter to the research stations at Alpha Centauri, reported the same thing. The massive ships had appeared everywhere at once, positioning themselves over every human world like a carefully planned chess move. Then came the message. It broadcast on every frequency, in every human language, translated perfectly into dialects that some of the outer colonies had developed. The voice was cold, mechanical, but somehow alive. It spoke with the authority of ages. Primitive species designated human, the voice began. You exist by the tolerance of the Galactic Council. For 3,000 years we have maintained order in this spiral arm. 47 species bow to our wisdom. You will be the 48th. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The Galactic Council? In all their explorations, humans had never heard of such a thing. Yet here they were, speaking as if they owned the galaxy. The message continued. You have 72 standard hours to comply with Council authority. Your military forces will surrender. Your genetic code will be modified to remove aggressive tendencies. Your population will relocate to designated reservation worlds where you will serve the greater galactic good. The voice paused, and Sarah could almost feel the cold smile behind it. Compliance is not optional. Resistance is futile. You have seen what happens to species that refuse our generous offer. The display screens around the bridge flickered, showing holographic images that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. Dead worlds, planets cracked open like eggs, solar systems where nothing remained but floating rocks and debris. The narrator's voice continued over the images of destruction. The Sathul chose resistance. The Void Swimmers chose resistance. The Bright Singers chose resistance. They no longer exist. Choose wisely, humans. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in shocked silence. Sarah looked around at her officers. Commander Martinez looked pale. Lieutenant Singh was staring at the tactical display where hundreds of red dots showed the positions of council ships. Each dot represented a vessel that could probably destroy Earth's entire fleet single-handed. Admiral, whispered Communications Officer Park. We're receiving similar reports from all colonies. They're everywhere. Every human world has council ships in orbit. Sarah nodded slowly. She had been a soldier for 20 years, had fought pirates and raiders in the outer systems. But this was different. This was extinction looking humanity in the face and politely asking them to lie down and die. The next few hours were chaos. Emergency sessions convened on every world. Military leaders ran calculations and came up with the same terrible answer. The council ships used technology centuries ahead of anything humans possessed. Their shields could probably stop Earth's most powerful weapons. Their weapons could crack planets. In the war room beneath Geneva, President Martinez, no relation to the commander, sat at a table surrounded by humanity's leaders. The Secretary General of the colonies, the Director of Colonial Defense, the heads of the major corporations and research institutions, all of them looking at the same impossible math. The odds, said General Harrison, head of strategic planning, are not good. Our entire fleet consists of 847 combat vessels. Intelligence estimates the Council fleet at over 12,000 ships, each one technologically superior to our best. What about our allies? Asked Director Kim of the Research Division. The Keepers, the Singers. Already contacted them, replied Admiral Chen via hologram from the orbital station. The Keepers say they're sorry but cannot help. The Singers have gone completely silent. I think they're terrified. The room fell quiet. Outside, the massive council ship continued to hover over the city, its shadow falling across millions of people who didn't yet know their world had changed forever. So what do we do? Asked President Martinez. Before anyone could answer, the room's communication system activated. Reports flooded in from across human space, not from governments or military commands, but from ordinary people. A construction worker on Mars Prime had welded a message into the steel frame of a new building. Come and take it. A teacher on the agricultural world of New Eden had uploaded a video of her students, children aged 6 to 16, standing in their classroom, singing an old Earth song about freedom. Their voices carried across space through the quantum net, picked up and retransmitted by millions of people. From the mining stations of the asteroid belt came defiant messages scratched into metal plates. We die free. From the research stations came scientific papers, hastily written analyses of council technology, looking for weaknesses. Even the peaceful farming colonies were reporting that their militia groups were forming, farmers and teachers and doctors taking up arms they had never expected to use. Sarah watched the reports flood in and felt something stir in her chest. Fear, yes, but something else, something that had carried humans from caves to starships. The president stood up slowly. Around the table, humanity's leaders were reading the same messages, seeing the same defiance spreading like wildfire across human space. The decision, when it came, was unanimous. Admiral Chen received the formal response 3 hours before the deadline. She transmitted it to the council ship hanging over Geneva on all frequencies, making sure every human world could hear it too. High Arbiter Zexthul of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice steady and clear. Humanity has received your generous offer. We have considered it carefully. We understand the consequences of our response. She paused, looking out at the massive alien ship that could probably destroy her station with a single shot. Our answer is no. Earth stands free. All human worlds stand free. We will not submit. We will not be relocated. We will not be modified. If you want our worlds, you will have to take them. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, every human in the galaxy held their breath. Then the council ship's weapons began to charge, and the war for humanity's survival began. Across 12 star systems, on worlds where humans had built homes and raised children and dreamed of peaceful futures, the impossible choice had been made. They would rather die free than live as slaves. The 72 hours were up. The galaxy was about to learn what humans did when cornered. The countdown to war began immediately after Admiral Chen's defiant response echoed across human space. 72 hours to prepare for the impossible. 72 hours to find a way to fight gods. In the Deep Space Research Facility hidden in the asteroid belt, Dr. Elena Vasquez had not slept for 36 hours. Around her, the best minds humanity could gather worked frantically in laboratories that had been carved out of floating rocks. Coffee cups and energy drink containers littered workbenches where scientists bent over equipment that hummed with dangerous energy. Show me the readings again, Elena said, rubbing her eyes. Her team had been working on something they called Project Prometheus, weapons research that pushed the very limits of physics. For months, they had been developing things that the cautious council species would never dare to build. Dr. Kim, a young physicist with dark circles under his eyes, pulled up holographic displays showing their latest test results. The quantum torpedoes work, but they're unstable. When they exist in superposition, they can strike multiple targets at once across different dimensions. The problem is keeping them from exploding in our own ships. Elena nodded, studying the data. The Council's technology was advanced, but it was also old, ancient. They had perfected their weapons and defenses over thousands of years, then stopped innovating. Why improve something that already worked perfectly? But humans were different. Humans had only been in space for a few centuries. They were still learning, still experimenting, still making dangerous mistakes that sometimes led to incredible breakthroughs. What about the mirror protocol? Elena asked. Dr. Singh, a quantum engineer who had joined the project from the outer colonies, smiled tiredly. That one actually works better than expected. Any energy weapon fired at us gets reflected back with doubled power. The math is beautiful. We're using their own quantum field mechanics against them. Across human space, similar scenes played out. On Mars, entire factories had been converted to military production. Workers who had been building farming equipment now assembled missile launchers. The giant industrial printers that made building materials for new colonies now produced armor plating and weapons components. Captain Marcus Rivera stood in the main hangar of the orbital shipyard above Jupiter, watching the impossible transformation of humanity's civilian fleet. Cargo ships that had carried grain and manufactured goods between worlds now bristled with improvised weapons. Passenger liners designed for comfortable travel had been stripped down and fitted with military shields. "Sir," called out Chief Engineer Thompson, a grizzled veteran who had been building ships for 40 years. "The retrofit on the grain hauler Harvest Moon is complete. She's got enough firepower to take on a council frigate now." Marcus nodded, watching welders attach torpedo launchers to what had been a peaceful merchant vessel just days ago. It should have been impossible. The ship's frame was never designed for military equipment. The power systems were meant for cargo handling, not energy weapons. But somehow human engineers were making it work. The secret was adaptation. Where council engineers followed precise specifications developed over millennia, humans improvised. They used mining explosives as warheads. They turned cargo handling systems into missile launchers. They connected systems in ways that violated every safety protocol but somehow worked anyway. "Captain," Thompson continued, "I have to ask, are we actually going to win this fight?" Marcus looked out at the growing fleet of converted civilian ships. 800 military vessels had become over 3,000 armed ships of various sizes. They were crude, dangerous, and held together with determination and spare parts. Against the Council's advanced technology, they should have been worthless. "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but we're going to make them regret starting it." High above Earth, aboard the massive Council ship Eternal Dominion, High Arbiter Zexthul reviewed intelligence reports on human military preparations. His insectoid features showed no expression as he studied the data, but his advisors could sense his amusement. "They are attaching crude weapons to civilian vessels," reported Tactical Coordinator Vashati. "Our sensors detect massive energy buildups in their research facilities. They appear to be developing new weapon systems." Zexthul's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. How typical of a primitive race. They believe that desperation and creativity can overcome superior technology and experience. "We have fought wars for 3,000 years. We have crushed species far more advanced than these humans." But Vashati felt something that her species rarely experienced: doubt. The human activity patterns were unlike anything in the Council's vast military databases. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, either surrendered immediately or fought according to standard military doctrine. "The humans seem to be doing neither, High Arbiter," Vashati said carefully. "Their behavior is unusual. They show no signs of preparation for surrender. Their communication suggests they genuinely believe they can achieve victory." "Belief," Zexthul replied dismissively, "does not alter mathematical reality. Their largest ships are smaller than our fighters. Their most powerful weapons cannot penetrate our shields. They will be crushed within hours, and then the galaxy will see what happens to species that defy the Council." In the underground bunkers beneath Earth's major cities, families hugged each other goodbye. Children were evacuated to the deepest shelters, while adults took positions at hastily constructed defense stations. The planet's orbital defense platforms, originally built to stop asteroids, were loaded with every weapon humanity could manufacture. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of humanity's newest ship, the UCS Defiance. Built in record time using experimental technology, it represented the best of human engineering and desperation. Its hull was made from materials that shouldn't exist, quantum-enhanced metals that could absorb energy and redistribute it. Its weapons systems used principles that the Council's ancient computers couldn't calculate. Around her, the combined human fleet prepared for battle. Military vessels alongside converted cargo ships, research vessels fitted with experimental weapons, even small exploration craft that had volunteered to fight despite having no chance of survival. "Admiral," reported Communications Officer Park, "all ships report ready. All colonies have confirmed their defense preparations. The experimental weapon systems are online and functional. Sarah looked out at the tactical display showing thousands of human ships facing off against the Council's massive fleet. The numbers were still impossible. But somehow in the past 72 hours, impossible had become irrelevant. All ships, she broadcast on the open channel. This is Admiral Chen. Today we face an enemy that has ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They have technology we can barely understand. They have weapons that can crack planets. They have never been defeated. She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew, young men and women who had signed up to protect human colonies from pirates now preparing to fight gods. But they have never fought humans before. They don't understand that we don't fight fair. They don't know that we never give up. They think that superior technology guarantees victory. Today we teach them better. The countdown timer hit 0. The Council's deadline expired. In the cold vacuum of space, two very different philosophies of war were about to collide. Ancient perfection against desperate innovation. Order against chaos. The certainty of overwhelming force against the wild hope of the human spirit. The first shots were fired by the Council, massive energy beams that could have shattered moons. But instead of striking human ships, the beams hit something impossible. Mirrors made of twisted space-time that reflected the weapons back at their source with doubled power. The war for humanity's survival had begun, and the first casualties were Council ships destroyed by their own weapons. Across the galaxy, ancient databases updated with a new entry. Species classification, human. Threat level, unpredictable. The Battle of Sol began with the sound of gods screaming. High Arbiter Zexthul had expected the first volley to end the war. His dreadnoughts fired planet cracker cannons that had reduced 100 worlds to ash. Energy beams that could melt continents lanced through space toward Earth's pathetic fleet of converted cargo ships and crude military vessels. Instead, the impossible happened. The beams struck strange distortions in space, fields of twisted reality that the human scientists called mirror protocol generators. The deadly energy bounced back like light off water, but amplified, focused, turned into something twice as destructive as what the Council had fired. 3 Council dreadnoughts, each one a kilometer of advanced technology and quantum armor, simply exploded. The reflected energy tore through their shields like they were made of paper. Pieces of alien ships tumbled through space, broadcasting distress signals in languages that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Impossible, whispered Zexthul, staring at his tactical displays. Calculate the probability of— The probability is 0, interrupted Tactical Coordinator Vashati. According to our models, this should not be happening. But it was happening. Across the Sol system, human forces were doing things that violated every rule of civilized warfare. A converted grain hauler called Harvest Moon rammed itself into a Council cruiser, its hull packed with mining explosives. The explosion gutted both ships, but the human crew had ejected in escape pods, laughing and cheering as their sacrifice took down an enemy vessel 10 times more advanced. Captain Maya Okafor piloted her fighter straight into the hangar bay of a Council capital ship. Her small craft, nothing more than engines and weapons hastily bolted together, should have been vaporized by the ship's defenses. Instead, she used a technique no sane pilot would attempt, flying in the gravity shadow of debris, using the larger ship's own mass to hide her approach. Her fighter's modified engine went critical just as she reached the hangar. The controlled antimatter explosion carved through the capital ship's interior, like a sword through flesh. Maya's final transmission echoed across the battlefield. Terra Invicta. Earth unconquered! But the real shock came when humanity's experimental weapons proved to work exactly as designed. Dr. Elena Vasquez had warned Admiral Chen that the quantum torpedoes were untested, dangerous, potentially suicidal to use. She had not mentioned that they would be absolutely devastating to an enemy, unprepared for weapons that broke the laws of physics. The first quantum torpedo hit 3 Council ships simultaneously. Existing in superposition until the moment of impact, it struck targets that were separated by thousands of kilometers, as if distance meant nothing. The alien vessels, designed to withstand conventional weapons, had no defense against attacks that technically happened and didn't happen until observed. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, piloting the experimental ship Prometheus, fired the weapon and watched in amazement as enemy vessels simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, erased. The quantum torpedo collapsed their probability matrices, making them never were instead of destroyed. All ships, Admiral Chen broadcast, weapons free. Show them what happens when you corner humans. The battle spread across the solar system like a virus of violence. At Jupiter, converted mining ships used gravity tethers to swing asteroids at council vessels. The aliens' advanced sensors couldn't track projectiles that had no energy signature, just rock and metal hurled by invisible gravitational fields. At Mars, the orbital defense platforms revealed their true purpose. What had appeared to be simple asteroid defense systems were actually quantum launchers, firing projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Council ships would detect incoming fire from one direction, only to be hit from 6 different angles by the same weapon. The human tactics made no sense to the Council commanders. Where civilized species fought according to established doctrine, humans improvised constantly. They shared innovations across their fleet in real time, adapting and evolving their strategies faster than the Council's ancient command structures could respond. Zexthul watched his carefully planned assault dissolve into chaos. His ships were superior in every measurable way, but the humans fought like they had nothing to lose. Worse, they fought like they enjoyed it. High Arbiter, Vashati reported. We have lost 317 vessels. Human losses are minimal. How minimal? Zexthul demanded. 89 ships, most of them civilian conversions. Sir, they are achieving kill ratios that should be mathematically impossible. The truth was becoming clear to the tactical coordinator, even if the High Arbiter refused to accept it. The humans had turned the fundamental nature of warfare upside down. While the Council fought to minimize losses and achieve objectives, humans fought to cause maximum damage regardless of cost. They used tactics that guaranteed their own destruction as long as they took enemies with them. Dr. Kenji Nakamura, captured during a raid on a research station, sat in his holding cell aboard the Eternal Dominion and listened to the battle reports. The alien guards had assumed he couldn't understand their language, but human intelligence had been studying Council communications for years. You want to know how we're winning? He called out to his captors. It's simple. You've been fighting the same war for 3,000 years. Same tactics, same strategies, same assumptions about how civilized beings conduct warfare. One of the guards, a reptilian creature with translator implants, hissed at him to be quiet, but Kenji continued. We've been preparing for this war for 3 days and we're already better at it than you are. You know why? Because we don't fight fair. We don't fight to preserve our ships or minimize casualties. We fight to win. The guard raised its weapon, but another voice stopped it. Vashti herself entered the holding area, her crystalline features reflecting the ship's lights. Explain, she commanded. Kenji smiled. You fight like accountants, calculating risks, minimizing losses, following protocols written by committees thousands of years ago. We fight like humans. We adapt, we improvise. We do whatever it takes. He gestured toward the walls where the sound of explosions could be heard even through the ship's massive armor. Right now, some human pilot is probably doing something that your tactical computers say is impossible. And it's going to work. As if summoned by his words, the ship shuddered as something struck it. Emergency alarms began blaring as reports flooded in. A human torpedo had somehow bypassed all shields and struck the main reactor. The torpedo shouldn't have been able to exist in the same space as the ship's defenses, but human weapons weren't constrained by what should be possible. The battle raged for 18 hours. By the end, the Council's mighty invasion fleet was in full retreat. Ships that had conquered 100 worlds fled before converted merchant vessels and experimental fighters held together with determination and spare parts. High Arbiter. Zexthul stood in his ruined command center, staring at tactical displays that showed the impossible. The humans had not just survived his assault, they had won. 3,000 years of Council supremacy, shattered by a species that had only reached the stars a few centuries ago. Prepare the fleet for withdrawal, he ordered, his voice hollow with shock. Sir, Vashati said quietly. What do we tell the Council? Zexthul looked at the display showing Earth, still spinning peacefully in its orbit despite the massive battle fought around it. Humanity's blue world continued its ancient rotation, unmarked by the war that should have ended their existence. We tell them, he said finally, that we have encountered something new. Something that doesn't follow the rules. As the surviving Council ships fled toward the edge of the solar system, they left behind a field of debris that told the story of the day the impossible became reality. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had been defeated in open battle. On Earth, children emerged from bunkers to see the stars again. In cities across the planet, people looked up at skies no longer darkened by alien ships. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge, surrounded by officers who could barely believe what they had accomplished. "Ma'am," Communications Officer Park reported, "we're receiving messages from all colonies. The Council fleets are retreating everywhere. We actually did it," Sarah nodded slowly. "They had won the first battle." But she knew this was just the beginning. The Council would not accept defeat quietly. They would return with greater force, more ships, deadlier weapons. But for now, humanity had proven something that would echo across the galaxy. Gods could bleed. And if they could bleed, they could die. The war for humanity's survival had become something larger. It had become a war for the future of galactic civilization itself. News of humanity's impossible victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds and 1,000,000 cities, beings who had lived their entire lives under Council rule heard whispers of the impossible. The humans had fought the Council fleet, and won. On the industrial world of Kethmore, Krax pressed his scaled hands against the hot metal of the orbital foundry where he had worked for 30 years. His reptilian species, the Saurians, had built ships for the Council for 8 centuries. Their natural engineering skills had been turned to serving their conquerors, building the very vessels that enforced galactic oppression. "Is it true?" whispered his work partner, Thess. Her voice was barely audible over the sound of automated hammers shaping quantum steel. "Did the humans really destroy Council dreadnoughts?" Krax checked the security monitors, making sure no overseers were watching. The Council's surveillance was constant, but even they couldn't monitor every conversation on every world. "I saw the technical reports," he said quietly. "The humans used weapons that shouldn't exist. Gravity bombs, quantum mirrors, things that break the laws of physics." Thess's eyes widened. "But how? They're so young, so primitive." "Maybe that's why," Krax replied, studying the ship components they were building. "We've been following Council engineering principles for so long, we forgot how to innovate. The humans never learned our limitations." Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening in secret. In the crystal cities of the Andorian cluster, the resonance felt something new flowing through their quantum communication networks. Hope. For the first time in 1,000 years, the crystalline beings began to remember songs their ancestors had sung before the Council's arrival, songs of freedom and starlight and choosing their own destiny. Elder Shiara stood in the great resonance chamber, her crystalline body picking up harmonics from across the cluster. The quantum frequencies carried more than data. They carried emotion. Fear was giving way to something the resonance had almost forgotten, the possibility of change. "The humans fight with madness," reported Junior Resonant Veltar. "Their tactics make no sense. They sacrifice valuable resources for minimal tactical gain." "Do they?" Shiara asked. "Or do they understand something we have forgotten? What if their wasteful tactics serve a purpose we cannot calculate?" On the Council's primary fortress world of Hegemonia Prime, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened for the first time in 2 centuries. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Crystal Dome, where galactic law had been written for 3 millennia. High Arbiter Zexthul stood before the assembled delegates, his insectoid features showing none of the shock he felt inside. Around him, beings of every imaginable form, gaseous clouds contained in force fields, crystalline entities that sang their thoughts, creatures of living metal, all waited for his explanation of the impossible. "The human resistance," he began. His words translated into 47 languages simultaneously, "has proven more challenging than anticipated." War Prime Thaclon of the Hegemonic Assembly rose from his seat, his massive form radiating displeasure. "Challenging? Our reports indicate that 3 fleets have been destroyed by a species that should not even possess space travel." "The humans employ tactics that violate established military doctrine," Zexthul replied. "They use weapons that should not function. They fight with a disregard for efficiency that borders on insanity." Wisdom Keeper Elthara of the Etherian Collective floated forward, her energy form shimmering with concern. Perhaps it is time to reconsider our approach. The humans demonstrate a willingness to die rather than submit. This is unprecedented. Death can be arranged, Thacklon growled. I call for the immediate deployment of the extinction protocols. Sterilize their worlds. Make an example that will last another 3,000 years. But even as the debate raged, reports flooded in that changed everything. The rebellion was spreading. 3 species had openly declared for humanity. The Saurians, using their engineering skills to improve human weapons. The Resonants, providing quantum communication networks that allowed instant coordination across impossible distances. And the nomadic Star Wanderers, whose knowledge of hyperspace routes gave human forces unprecedented mobility. Captain Zhang Wei stood on the bridge of the UHS Liberator, watching the impossible sight of a mixed fleet preparing for battle. Human ships flew alongside Saurian engineering vessels and resonant crystal ships. The Star Wanderers had provided coordinates for a jump that would take them directly to the Council's primary shipyard at Vegan Prime. Captain, reported his Saurian engineering officer. Cracks, the same factory worker who had answered the call for freedom. The quantum torpedoes are armed with our improved guidance systems. They can now navigate through hyperspace to strike targets in distant systems. Zhang nodded, studying the tactical display. The Council fortress at Vegan Prime was supposed to be impregnable, built around a neutron star, protected by gravity wells and quantum barriers. It had stood for 2,000 years as a symbol of Council power. Navigation. Prepare for hyperspace jump. All ships prepare for Operation Starfall. The jump lasted only seconds, but when the combined fleet emerged from hyperspace, they brought with them weapons the Council had never imagined. Saurian modified quantum torpedoes that could strike through dimensions. Resonant harmonic disruptors that turned solid matter into singing crystal. Star Wanderer gravity bombs that collapsed spacetime itself. The Battle of Vegan Prime lasted exactly 12 minutes. When it was over, the fortress that had stood for 2 millennia was nothing but expanding debris around a naked neutron star. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked in her new laboratory aboard the research ship Prometheus, surrounded by scientists from 4 different species. The breakthrough had come from cooperation, human innovation, Saurian engineering, resonant quantum harmonics, and Star Wanderer spacetime manipulation combined into something unprecedented. The Harmony Protocol is ready, she announced to the mixed team. Instead of destroying Council ships, we can liberate them. Free their crews from the psychological conditioning that has maintained Council control for millennia. The first test came during a skirmish near the Rigel system. When human forces encountered a Council patrol, instead of destroying the enemy ships, they fired harmony beams, weapons that didn't damage hulls but rewrote the quantum patterns that controlled thought and emotion. The results were immediate and shocking. Council ships began broadcasting on open frequencies, their crews speaking of awakening and remembering choice. 3 cruisers and a dreadnought immediately defected to the Human Alliance, their crews begging for forgiveness and offering to fight against their former masters. High Arbiter Zexthol received these reports in his private chambers, surrounded by the artifacts of 3,000 years of galactic rule, crowns from 100 conquered kings, art from civilizations that existed now only in Council museums. The accumulated wealth and culture of 47 species. For the first time in his long life, he felt something the Council had bred out of most species: fear. Tactical Coordinator Vashati, he called. Yes, High Arbiter. Implement Directive Omega. All fleets, all weapons, all resources. The complete sterilization of human space and the elimination of any species that has aided them. Vashati hesitated. Sir, that will require the deployment of planet killers. The use of weapons banned by our own laws for 2,000 years. The humans have forced us to this extremity, Zexthol replied. If we cannot maintain control through superiority, we will maintain it through terror. Prepare the doomsday fleets. But even as the most terrible weapons in galactic history began moving toward human space, something else was spreading through the galaxy. The Harmony Protocol, broadcast through resonant networks and Star Wanderer hyperspace routes, began reaching Council worlds directly. On 47 planets, beings who had served the Council faithfully for millennia suddenly began to remember what they had lost. The aquatic nautiloids recalled their homeworld's crystal cities, flooded when the Council deemed them inefficient. The silicon-based architects remembered mountains, that sang with harmonic frequencies before Council. Mining operations reduced them to dust. Most dangerous of all, the truth about the Council's peaceful unification began spreading. 3,000 years of systematic conquest and genocide, hidden behind propaganda about bringing order to chaos. The primitive species the Council claimed to protect were revealed to be the survivors of cultural annihilation. Admiral Chen received the intelligence reports with growing amazement. Across the galaxy, Council member species were beginning to question their loyalty. Some were secretly providing information to human forces. Others were sabotaging Council operations from within. "Ma'am," reported Communications Officer Park, "we're detecting massive fleet movements. The Council is deploying everything they have. This isn't another invasion, it's total war." Sarah nodded grimly. They had known this moment would come. The Council could not allow humanity's rebellion to succeed. If humans could resist and win, if the idea of freedom could spread, then 3,000 years of galactic order would collapse. "Send the message," she ordered. "All human forces, all allied vessels, all free peoples of the galaxy. This is Artemis Protocol." The final war began not with a single battle, but with the galaxy itself erupting into violence. Across 100,000 star systems, the ancient order of the Galactic Council met the chaotic fury of human-inspired rebellion in battles that would reshape the very nature of civilization. High Arbiter Zexthul commanded his forces from the ultimate symbol of Council. Power, the heart of authority, a massive structure built around the galaxy's central black hole. For 3,000 years, this fortress had coordinated Council rule across impossible distances, its quantum networks reaching every member world simultaneously. Now those same networks carried reports of catastrophe. At Tau Ceti, human forces had deployed something called the Cascade Protocol, artificial black holes that chain-reacted through hyperspace, dragging entire Council fleets into gravitational annihilation. At Proxima Centauri, Saurian engineers had turned an asteroid belt into a kinetic weapons platform, hurling planet killers at Council dreadnoughts with primitive but devastating effectiveness. "How many ships have we lost?" Zexthul demanded. Tactical Coordinator Vashati studied her displays with growing horror. 7,000 vessels destroyed. 11,000 more have defected. The Harmony Protocol continues to spread through our fleets faster than we can counter it. The Harmony Protocol, humanity's most insidious weapon, not a destroyer of ships but a liberator of minds. Wherever human forces encountered Council vessels, they fired beams that didn't damage hulls but freed crews from millennia of psychological conditioning. Ship after ship began broadcasting messages of awakening, their crews remembering what it meant to choose their own destiny. But the humans' greatest weapon wasn't technological, it was infectious hope. The resonance had linked minds across the galaxy, creating a real-time network of consciousness that allowed hundreds of species to fight as a unified force for the first time in galactic history. Information flowed instantly from world to world. A tactical breakthrough at Alpha Centauri was implemented at Rigel within minutes. A new weapon deployed at Vega was copied and improved at a dozen other battle sites before the Council could even understand what had happened. Dr. Elena Vasquez led the assault on the Council's ultimate weapon, a stellar engineering project that could turn entire stars into bombs. Working with a team of liberated Council scientists, she had developed countermeasures that seemed impossible, quantum viruses that could rewrite the programming of stellar manipulation devices, turning the Council's own weapons against them. "The star bomb at Rigel is neutralized," she reported to Admiral Chen. "We've reversed its polarity. Instead of going supernova, it's now producing an energy field that disrupts Council quantum shields throughout the entire system." Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UFS Liberation, watching the impossible unfold on her tactical displays. The galactic civil war had reached every corner of known space, and humanity was winning battles they should never have survived. But the true victory wasn't measured in ships destroyed or territories captured. It was measured in minds freed. The aquatic nautiloids had risen from their flooded homeworld, using their mastery of fluid dynamics to turn ocean worlds into fortress planets. The silicon-based architects were building defense systems that grew like living things, structures that adapted and evolved to counter any attack. Even species that had served the Council faithfully for millennia were beginning to remember what they had lost. Captain Marcus Rivera commanded the desperate boarding action that would decide the fate of galactic civilization. His target was the heart of authority itself, the quantum fortress that coordinated council power across space and time. His weapon was not advanced technology but human determination, backed by the desperate courage of a dozen species fighting for their freedom. Remember, he told his mixed crew of humans, Saurians, Resonants, and Star Wanderers, we're not here to destroy the heart, we're here to liberate it. Every system, every network, every control matrix, we turn it all against the Council. The assault ships were crude things, converted mining vessels and cargo haulers. Held together by ingenuity and hope, they should have been vaporized by the fortress's defenses long before reaching their target. Instead, they used every trick humanity had learned in 6 months of impossible warfare. Quantum stealth systems borrowed from the Star Wanderers made them invisible to sensors. Saurian engineered shields that absorbed energy and redirected it, let them survive weapons that could crack planets. Resonant harmonic disruptors turned the fortress's own structure against itself, creating gaps in the defenses that shouldn't have existed. High Arbiter Zexthal watched his ultimate stronghold being invaded by what he still thought of as primitive barbarians. In desperation, he activated the Heart of Authority's final protocol, a quantum cascade that would reset galactic civilization itself. Every species would have their memories wiped, their cultures erased, their development restarted under Council guidance. It was genocide on an unimaginable scale, but it would preserve Council rule. Initiating Memory Cascade, he announced to his remaining loyal forces. In 30 minutes, galactic civilization will be restored to its proper order. But Marcus Rivera and his team had reached the heart's core. The chamber was vast beyond human comprehension, filled with quantum matrices that pulsed with the accumulated power of 3,000 years of galactic rule. At its center stood the control system that could erase the memories of 1 trillion beings. Elena, Marcus called over his comm, please tell me you have a solution. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled back, strained with exhaustion and desperate hope. The cascade can't be stopped, but it can be redirected. Instead of erasing memories, we can restore them. Every culture the Council destroyed, every song they silenced, every dream they crushed, we can bring it all back. Marcus looked at the alien controls, systems designed by species he couldn't even pronounce. Around him, his mixed crew worked frantically to understand technology that violated everything they knew about physics. They had minutes before the cascade would fire, erasing 3,000 years of galactic history. Do it, he ordered. The quantum cascade erupted from the Heart of Authority with the force of a newborn star. It spread across the galaxy faster than thought, touching every world, every mind, every consciousness in known space. But instead of erasure, it brought remembrance. On 1,000 worlds, species suddenly recalled what they had been before the Council's conquest. The Resonants remembered when their songs had shaped matter itself, creating art from living crystal and singing new moons into existence. The Nautiloids remembered cities that flowed like water, architecture that danced with the tides. The architects remembered when they had built not weapons but wonders, structures that reached between stars and sang with the harmony of creation. The effect on Council forces was instantaneous and complete. Ship after ship began broadcasting surrender signals as their crews awakened from millennia of enforced obedience. Some Council species chose to flee to distant galaxies, rather than face the species they had oppressed. Others begged for forgiveness and offered to help rebuild what they had destroyed. High Arbiter Zexthal stood alone in his command chamber as his empire collapsed around him. Through the fortress's viewports, he could see the galaxy changing in real time. Worlds that had been uniform Council territories now blazed with the lights of individual cultures. Species that had been standardized into obedience were celebrating their rediscovered uniqueness. Bashati entered the chamber, but she was no longer his subordinate. The quantum cascade had freed her mind as well, and she remembered what her people had been before the Council's conquest. It's over, she said simply. The galaxy is free. Admiral Chen received the surrender of the Galactic Council aboard the Liberation, with representatives from hundreds of species witness to the end of 3,000 years of oppression. The formal ceremony was brief. There was too much work to be done, too many worlds to heal, too many cultures to restore. Dr. Elena Vasquez established the Galactic Compact, not a ruling council but a voluntary association based on cooperation rather than dominion. Species could choose to participate or remain independent. They could share technology or keep their secrets. For the first time in galactic history, Choice was universal. Marcus Rivera stood in the observation deck of the former Heart of Authority, now renamed the Monument to Freedom. Through the transparent walls he could see the galactic center in all its glory, not as the seat of oppressive power, but as a symbol of unity and diversity. The stars themselves seemed different now. Where once they had shone with the cold light of enforced order, they now blazed with the warm fire of free civilizations. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had liberated it, replacing ancient chains with chaotic, messy, beautiful freedom. Children on Earth looked up at night skies filled with the lights of celebration from 1,000 worlds. The aurora danced with colors that had never been seen before, as free civilizations sent greetings across the void in languages that had been forbidden for millennia. The war was over. The galaxy was free, and somewhere in the vast expanse of space, new species were taking their first steps toward the stars, knowing that they would find not conquest but welcome, not oppression but opportunity.